So I just want to say that I have worked with, before I worked at JVN, I'd spent the last 26 years working in volunteer management, building a whole range of teams. And certainly in the times that I have been working with volunteer managers, the recruitment of volunteers has changed. And also quite a lot of the profile of the people that I have been recruiting has very much changed. So what I would say is that this is of the day, and things change. And I've tried to put some changes and some different ways and ideas that we can think about sort of recruiting volunteers. Sorry, I don't know how I managed to do that, so I apologize. The session today is creating an adverts to target the right volunteers. And how I'd like to sort of hopefully run the session is 20 minutes of me, although if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Then a breakout activity where hopefully you're going to look at some role outlines that maybe you can discuss, or in fact just talk to each other about ways that you found effective to recruit volunteers. And then we'll come back together for a question and answer. So the first thing I wanted to say is before you get started with creating your actual advert is really we need to take a second to think about the role itself. And one of the things I would like to say is this morning I spent two focus groups with groups of volunteers, and they didn't really talk about the only thing they talked about without the role that they applied for. And the real thing that made the massive difference for them was everyone said about the manager who interviewed them and recruited them and told them about the role. So whilst it's really important that we understand that, you know, when you start to write a role, I don't know if you're writing roles or if you're creating roles, or if you're responsible for, you know, I don't know if people come to you. One of the key things to have in any role outline is that there is going to be a manager, and to make sure that that manager is prepared to welcome that volunteer. Because actually one of the volunteers said to me today that she stayed in a volunteer role for 8 years for a charity she didn't like because the volunteer manager was so effective. So, you know, I think it's really important that the foundations before you begin to create the role advert is really very, very important. So what is the purpose of a role advert? I think it's very clear that, you know, charities decides that they need to promote into a role. So it's an announcement that a role is open to applicants, and within it is to tell potential volunteers why your volunteer role is worth applying for. I'm going to get that. So what should be in a role advert? So the purpose of it is to attract potential volunteers by highlighting, you know, the key aspects of the role and encouraging people to.
I'm good. Going in a meeting.
Okay. It helps if there is a title that grabs their attention. What I would say is that I recently noticed, I did some research about what is the attention span of an adult. And on the data that I looked at, it was 8.25 seconds, which they said was less than a goldfish. Now, I'm not sure if it is accurate, but the reason I think it is important is because it really then makes an important of why the first thing that they see is so important. So by having a title or a message or a call to action within that sort of grabs their attention is really actually can stop them to pause. So I would really think that take a minute to think about how you're going to, you know, what is the first thing that you want them to see? And then within that, the other thing that I have noticed when I interview volunteers is we have a joke in our office, we call it little effort, big impact. People know that they are time poor, so they want to know that they can come in and out of a role and it's going to have a big impact. So most important is how the role that you're going to be offering supports the charity in delivering its mission. And secondly, what they're going to get out of it. Little effort, big impact. And I think that's something that people care about. I'd like to say this very clearly, not in a selfish way. people are time poor. And so often I have seen charities, come to me and they say, in fact, the charity came a few weeks ago, we need some volunteers just in case. So when we stripped it down, they just wanted volunteers to be standing around, and in the event that they were needed, to be flexible that they came. I understand why the charity wanted that, but those people don't have that flexibility often in their time that they want to stand around. They want to know that their time is valuable. So benefits of the role, it is about nurturing and growing, but it is also about helping them to see why this is worth stopping or pausing their week to put your volunteering into their week. Also, house reply, very important. Time commitment. But remember, this advert is an external document. It's going to people that don't know, that might not necessarily know your charity. And it's giving you an opportunity to engage with a new audience. So one of the other things I would say about role adverts is, and I say this to lots of people, most people think they know what your charity do, but they don't do. So this is an opportunity for you to sell your charity, and somebody may not necessarily volunteer with you, but they may know somebody who might be interested in volunteering with you. They may know somebody who might benefit from your charity. They may know somebody who might be interested in supporting your charity. So your role advert is a fantastic way to promote your charity and also recruiting for a volunteer. So never miss an opportunity, I always say, to promote your charity, because you do great work. Contact information is very important. Also, you need to think about where you're going to place this advert and how you're going to use with social media, how you're going to place it, where is the right space for your role advert. And I would say that we're going to talk about this later, but one of the things that we're aware of is that different age groups look for volunteering in different spaces. So, don't just think, I'm going to stick this on my website, I'm going to just stick this here. Think about the other creative ways that you can actually promote a role. Now, as Mushka said, if someone's attention span is 8.25 minutes, sometimes people have a habit of using lots and lots of words, confusing the advert with the role outline. The role outline is an internal document. So actually what you really want to do is your role outline advert should be sort of catchy enough that they want to get in touch with you. And then you can prevent them with the role outline, which has got the details of the named supervisor. You can also say on an advert, you're part of a team, there's going to be a named supervisor, but those kind of details, yes, training can be given on advert, but the details should go into the role advert, the role outline, which is the next thing that you will get them once they have come through the door. Then you can give them all the details, but don't confuse the two, because people often don't read everything on our websites. They just look for what they're interested in. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I think is really important to consider when creating a role advert is current data and trends. What we know, I mean, I'm sure that we've all quoted and been quoted time well spent till we're pink in the face. What they've said is for the 10th year running, ongoing volunteering is going down. So, if that is the case, then we need to think of, if you have a role that, for example, you used to think was, I mean, when I started my volunteer management, I had my Monday volunteers, my Tuesday volunteers, my Wednesday volunteers, and my Thursday volunteers. And they stayed for years. And they stayed all day. They probably weren't volunteering all day. Often they were building social networks, which was fine because that suited me. But if people say, that aren't going to be able to volunteer this time next year, they've already told you, or you're aware of that data, then sometimes you can think to yourself, well, if I need a befriender, really what's the minimum amount of time I'd hope them to stay? And you might be able to say, if you have, ideally 6 months, or, if you can't do every week, that's once a month, so think about, if people aren't doing ongoing volunteering, how can you be creative in your language that you can still fill a role, but not necessarily, not to create a role that is not going to attract attention. The other thing, again, is people talk about not wanting anything that feels like paid work. So another charity I know doesn't invite people to interview, they invite people to chat, because that feels very informal. They change their language, so it's less, work language, much more casual. You can drop in, you can sort of, so it feels that, okay, this is a friendly place to work. So language is very important. And as I said, the other thing is that if we know now that different age groups are going to be looking for volunteer roles in different spaces, think about when you create your role advert, where am I going to put this? Where am I going to put that? But the motivations for volunteering haven't changed. And certainly when we're thinking of volunteer role adverts, think about, I'm going to use the word avatar a lot, but think about the profile of the person who you think you want to attract into your role, and then think about the motivation that they may have for looking for a role. So as you know, some people use volunteering to build confidence, to build skills, to meet people, and think about those kinds of that headspace when you're creating some of your role adverts. So as I said, you should definitely be thinking of your avatar. So this is some of the things that I was thinking about. One of the things I would say is that in Time Well Spent, that he talked a lot about how people with disabilities talked about they didn't enjoy volunteering because they felt that they were volunteering beneath their own capacity. So when creating roles, think about how you're going to think about the profile, but then anything else that can increase the amount of people you can attract into your role. So if a role, for example, is befriending, is your building, or if you want someone to come into your office and do some admin, think about how do I attract people who may have accessibility issues? It might just be, we have car parking space if you need it. We're fully accessible. Think about, your clients, who would they attract to? Just really take a second to build an avatar of the person that you think would be ideal for your role, and then create words in your advert that can attract that person. So they can see themselves into your role. Does that make sense? And is anybody, already doing this? Is anybody, it'd be interesting to have some stories about, how people are attracting volunteers. Maybe we'll do that later. So initially, when we were talking about creating a role advert, we really talked about, I think the first place that we think about is our websites. So a website, the advantage of putting it on a website such as your own, or a website like JVN, or a local volunteer centre, is that it gives you space. So you can be detailed oriented. So websites provide more comprehensive details about the roles. So additionally, it's static, and therefore it stays. So people can look at it, go away, think about it, come back, go backwards and forwards a few times, and the content will stay the same. So hopefully, if they didn't, respond the first time, they can actually go back at a later time and know that role is there. So that's really good about that. Search engine optimization. Websites can optimize this for search engines, making it easier for those actively searching for opportunities to find them. So for example, if somebody was looking for a shop role in Glasgow or in Brighton, they can actually put that in and your volunteer opportunity will come up, which will make it really easy. And it's very professional. So the layout, the design of the website, professional and structured. So that's definitely the advantage of using a website. Social media. So social media has the advantage. Social media platforms can reach a broader and more diverse audience quickly, including those who are looking for volunteer engagement. Social media allows for interactive content such as videos, stories, and live sessions, which can engage potential volunteers much more effectively. You can do targeted advertising on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. They offer targeted advertising options, allowing charities to reach a much more specific demographic based on interests, and real-time updates. So social media, you can post, And if you've got the time like Mushka, she's very good at responding very, very quickly, making it easier to share urgent or time-sensitive volunteers. And we've certainly seen that with our own website when we've put a particular charity is having a crisis and they need, I don't know, meals to be delivered, or generally it's much more, roles that are much more immediate delivery or are helping out in a shop, and it goes up and immediately people can respond, which is great. And some charities, if you don't have the staff team to do it, then they do have volunteers. So that's a good opportunity to post a volunteer role for your own charity. And these are just some of the social media posts that we have been asked to put on for the charities that we work with. They're not all immediate, but it's sometimes, I know Jamie is a charity that works with mental health. So for example, if it was World Mental Health Day, that we use social media to boost awareness both of the day and of volunteer opportunities within the charity. We actually thought we would start using sort of these days or weeks to help our charity partners to promote their volunteering. There's one every day, so it can actually be both helpful, but sometimes you can also, you're in competition, you'll get lost with all the national days. Now the next thing, and I hope this works, I don't know if Mushka can help me with this. We did a conference recently, and we talked about social media, and we talked about the idea of TikToks. So the reason I wanted to put it in is when, I don't know if we can actually play this one, Mushka, but when the lady who was presenting actually from TikTok spoke, one of the things that she said that was really quite helpful for a lot of the charities is that your static advert has to be, if you like, perfect because it's there. But she said with TikTok, you can play around. And if it's, frankly, she said, if it's rubbish, no one will remember next week. So she was sort of saying that, within charities, we should be much more open to using social media, and it's okay to get, I'm just going to say, it's okay with TikTok, says somebody, it's not going to be perfect, but, sometimes let's be a bit open and be creative. So I don't know if we can play this. Can I just play this for a minute? Do you mind? Because I just thought it'd be really good for people to think about it, maybe a talking head. So just a minute, let's see how it goes. I apologize if it's too long.
Join me for a day volunteering as an advisor at Citizens Advice, which is an independent charity. Anyone can get in touch with us and we can help with all sorts of things such as housing, employment and benefits. First thing I do is terrorize Sandra. Here are all my wonderful fellow volunteers. First up is the morning meeting taken by the supervisors. And today we talked about the Household Support Fund, which is really going to help some of our clients with the cost of living. Then we're straight on the phones, and I have a client who's received an eviction notice from their landlord. They can't find anywhere else affordable to live in the area. I discussed the case with Valerie. He's a really experienced volunteer and always willing to help me. I do some further research and then call the client back and write up my case notes. Then it's time for a coffee and a walk because it's the sunniest day of the year so far. I have a quick lunch and then it's back on the phones. I speak to someone who's had a parking ticket and they're not sure if they should appeal, so I check out the advisor section of the Citizens Advice website, check something with my supervisor, Charlotte, then call them back, write up. Then Giles gives me the recipe of a meal he had for lunch last week that I was acquiring. I give them my Jamie all of that. Finally, I write a couple of emails, double check my case notes, and then that's it. If you do have time, I'd really recommend volunteering at Citizens Advice. I'm always interested. Join me for a day volunteering.
I'll just go to that one.
Join me for a...
Sorry. I think the thing that I liked about that was that, first of all, it gives a volunteer. When a volunteer is reading your role, what you want them to have is an emotional response, like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I really want to help that. Rob Jackson talks a lot about the emotional paycheck that volunteers have. In some ways, it's been really interesting for me when I meet people who want to volunteer. They often come to us with a particular idea of what they want. A lot of times they actually don't end up doing that role because something on the word of the page spoke to them in a way they weren't expecting. And I think with the TikTok, what I thought was it's really powerful for you can imagine yourself. I like that team. It looks friendly. I like the diversity of role. I like I recognize myself using those skills. I'd like to learn those skills. So, I mean, it is a bit out there. One of the things I would say as well that we have done is a member of our staff team is very good at doing a 30-second talking head about when we do pop-ups. So I think, again, a talking head, 30 seconds, again, and now people tell me, oh, I saw Angie, so can I speak to Angie? So again, it's about, are you comfortable enough building up your own profile as a volunteer manager? But it does create a relationship that I think between a potential volunteer and a volunteer manager. So, I mean, obviously, the other thing I would say as well is that we do use is WhatsApp groups. And again, the thing about WhatsApp groups is that we have seen, we start off, we have one for young professionals who again are time poor, but motivation high for one-off volunteering activities. And we started off with like 13 or 14 people on the WhatsApp group, and we are over 200 at the moment. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say to you 200 people regularly volunteer. They don't. But 200 people regularly know about the work that we do and the charities that we have. And it's a seed. You're planting a seed that one day they'll say, today's the day that I'm going to do it. So again, it's being creative, but it is, you have to think of your time. So I apologize that I'm just suggesting ideas that actually may take people who are already a bit time poor themselves and giving lots of extra work. But, equally different, as we can say, different spaces, different mediums may open you up to different people. I mean, as I said, we do the WhatsApp group with young professionals, but we know now that one of the most tech savvy groups is over 70. So let's not be sort of ageist. The other thing I would say is that it does kind of give you an opportunity to think about those people who are less tech savvy, that you could possibly spend more time with them. So what I thought I would do now, with Mushka's permission, I think we've got, I think we're on target, Mushka, maybe 15 minutes. That'll take us to, yeah, so I just went 5 minutes over. And I'd like to put you into groups. Now, I've given you some examples of role adverts that I've seen. That they are a bit old, so because I thought just in case any of the charities were here, they can say we don't use that one anymore. So I thought would be a really good opportunity for you to look at the adverts and then really discuss the following question is, do you understand the role? Do you understand the skills the volunteer will need or will hopefully learn? How will the charity benefit from this volunteer? And how will the volunteer benefit from volunteering with that charity? So I thought, put into groups 15 minutes, then we could come back and you could share some feedback, possibly share your own experience of recruitment, ask any questions, and we can have a conversation. Is that okay? Hi, Georgia. How are you?
Hi, good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Hi all.
Hi.
I love that, going through all the different breakout rooms and hearing the different conversations.
So, I mean, just if anybody has any, I will just look at anyone from the group who, for example, thank you. I hope you found that helpful, or in fact, just even speaking with other volunteer managers is often the most helpful part of these activities. So, I mean, I just wondered for a group that were looking at the Cancer Research UK role outline, if there was anything in there that they thought was particularly useful, or actually if they thought it was particularly off-putting.
I think I gave everyone like a mixture to choose from. So if anyone wants to come back and think of any volunteer role outlines that they looked at and had any comments that could help the rest of the team.
I can't see everybody's hand, so
I know they're all like jumping up saying, pick me, pick me.
So I mean maybe
Mags, do you want to chat?
I thought I'll be brave.
Yeah.
So we had the cat protection one that we were looking at.
Yeah.
And obviously we realised afterwards that it was a snippet from obviously an advert. But one of the things that we've noticed straight away was it lacked invitation. There was like no opening, like, do you love cats? You know, it's just something to draw you in straight away.
Yeah. And actually, I think this was a conversation which even Mushka and I were discussing last week because it came up. I don't know if it's quite new in conversations, but you know, as people are more and more looking for volunteering that doesn't feel like paid work, as I know it says, they talk about volunteer experience and language, and as you say, drawing somebody in by sort of saying, you know, this is for cat lovers. It just, or people who, you know, it really makes a massive difference. Has anyone else got any comments about the any of the other roles that they looked at, which they sort of thought, yeah, oh, I can, because it's not my role, because I'm taking a step back, I can see why I fall into that trap. Because sometimes I think as volunteer managers, we use a language that we don't realize that potential volunteers don't use or don't recognize. So
I think what I was saying in another room, I think what's really important is just take a step back and think, would I apply for this role? Like really go through your volunteer journey, go on your website from Google, type in your website, see how are you finding the volunteer page? Is it clear on your web page? Okay, I want to volunteer. Is it easy to filter the volunteer roles? Is there enough information? How am I reading it? Even ask like a friend to do that kind of like secret shopping exercise and see, does it appeal? Who does it appeal? Is it phone accessible as well? Like that's also really important thing. Can I read it on my phone? I really liked what you said. And when I was going through the different groups, Rachelle, the language part, I think is so key. Like you're right. Like so many times we use the word interview. And I remember when I was a volunteer manager, I said interview and someone came with a suit and tie because he thought he was coming for an actual interview. And I felt really bad that I intimidated him like that. And I think you're right. Like you should manage expectations that it's just an informal chat. But yeah, someone also had the youth manager one. That one was a really interesting one. Does anyone want to talk about that one? What team was that? No.
One of the things that I sort of thought when I was looking at this was, again, looking at the cancer research one, just because it was there, was it said expenses unpaid. And I thought that was something that, you know, it's like literally one of the first things you see. And I just thought it was such it was a lot of times I speak with volunteers who don't want to be paid. They say that, and we have this conversation about, isn't my volunteering part of my donating to that charity, the way of, I can't give money, so I give time. So I don't expect that. But it felt so cutting, you know, expenses unpaid. Like, first of all, I think it completely in 2024 will stop you having a diverse volunteer team. I'm not even talking about the legal and moral aspects of it, but I think that expenses is something that we should be very open and very clear about, saying we are welcoming people from diverse groups. And if, you know, money should not be a barrier to volunteering. And I feel very strongly about that. So I actually felt that when I got to that word, I just actually went off cancer research for a minute. And also something else further down, which actually came up, as I said, I was doing a focus group today, and some of the people were in a charity shop, and they were very specific. Our job is not to keep the shop clean, that's the cleaner's job. So I'm not saying that that isn't necessarily a role, but they were very clear that as a volunteer, you shouldn't, you know, that there were certain things that you shouldn't really, you're not there to be sort of free labor. And I think that, I think we were talking, Moshka, about having a session like volunteers are not free. And actually really working a lot with charities about the issue of expenses and free labor, which certainly shouldn't feel in a role advert. So the run with the Sue Rider, I thought about, it didn't mention time, but was clear about flexibility. And I think, as I said, flexibility, especially, again, I know focusing on charity shops, it used to be that the shift was a day, but as people are having less ability to be flexible, I now have volunteer charity shops who say, I'll take 2 hours, you know, I'll take 2 hours. That's really fine. I mean, the youth club manager role, I think the biggest thing for me was I just didn't understand what the role was. You know, and I was sort of sitting there thinking, what do they think they could do in 5 hours realistically? When you want it, it looks like you want them to literally set up, run, manage a program for kids. That doesn't necessarily, by the way, mean that you're not going to get applicants. It just means that you might get lots of applicants who have all read something very different into that role. So the thing, and another reason why targeted advertising is something we should think about, is because you may get less applicants, but they are much more likely to be suitable to the role. And I work with a lot of charities who claim that they have inundated with useless applicants, and I get very angry with the application, the people that apply. But when I look at the role, I say, but you didn't make something clear. You know, like a charity contacted me. They were very frustrated that they didn't get a 20-year-old applying for a role to peer support a 20-year-old. They were complaining about Gen Z and that they don't do and all this. And when we looked at the role advert, they clicked that the job was Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Well, I don't know many 20-year-olds Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 that are free to come and take someone to the doctors. Again, is it the right role? But I'm just saying, so, you know, sometimes by taking a moment, as Mushka said, and really thinking about it, you will get applicants, but they might not have the right skill and the right timeline. But on the flip side, I would say that once we had an advert that was posted, it was drivers wanted, we need some on Wednesday. Literally, that's what they said. And I thought, this is the worst role advert I've ever seen. But they got applicants because they understood the importance of that. Yes, Jen.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to mention something we spoke about as well in our group. So we talked about kind of the location of it. So we talked about if you're working in a bigger area, do you want to advertise it for the whole area, or do you want to advertise it really locally? And for one organization, it actually worked to do a more general one, and then like a general role in like a location. And for other organizations, it kind of works to do really specific roles in specific locations. So it's quite interesting there.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's like near a bus stop, I think also like put that in, like public transport accessible, things like that is also really important for people. You know, sometimes you have it in a bit of a rural area. I'm just conscious of time, and there was a couple of things I wanted to say was, I think in one of the breakout rooms, they were also talking about how people read things. Like sometimes it's just like a blob, like one paragraph. It's not easy to read. So think about headers and paragraphs. I think so. You don't see. I think it was Becca who said it. Like, you know, okay, where's the expenses? Okay, that's a header. I could just jump to that because that's all I'm interested in. So think of it how it's laid out, and as well tone. Don't make it sound so formal. Like you're not having, you know, it's not a job interview. Like make it fun, make it exciting. Say, drop in for a cuppa and we can chat about it. Like make it, the tone as well, I think is really important.
I think there's something to be said for proportionality as well. If you're asking for someone, like, you know, I'm making grand sweeping gestures here, but so forgive me. If it's a sort of delivering or working in a food bank where you're stacking things, you know, you don't want to give too much details, but there are roles within your charity like trustees, or if you're looking for someone. We recently posted for a project manager to help us update our website. And so that had to have specific language and had to be very specific, and it had to be, you know, quite very carefully crafted, because we were actually going for someone who had very, very specific skills. And I just want to say we got one applicant and he absolutely has aced it and has been amazing for us. So there's also proportionality. Sometimes you have to be very sort of exact in your language, because the volunteer role is going to be quite a very impactful role on your, a more of a leadership impactful role. So proportionality is something. But I just wanted to say, my final thoughts about role adverts, that I think that we need to sort of pause before we write an advert or a role description, is actually, be clear on what you're asking the volunteer to do. It has to be clear on the ask. Be clear on who you are looking for. So as I said, your avatar, who is the person that most likely can fill this skill? And again, it may not be a person, it might be a stage of life. Like, this role is perfect for someone who is left school or left work or works part-time or is free on the weekend. So, be clear on that kind of who you're looking for. Be clear on the impact it has to your charity, because people want to know that the role is making a difference. And, be clear on the impact it will have for them. And the final thing is in small letters, which is just also let them know that you're also going to be there to support them on the journey. And that's really, if anyone else if I've missed something, please let me know. But in the meantime, I thank you very much for donating an hour of your time, because I know that volunteer managers are very, very busy. We appreciate all that you do.
Thank you so much, Rachelle. Really, really appreciate your time. And I'll put your details up on the follow-up email with the recording and the slides. Really appreciate it. And any questions, feel free to email me or get in contact after my follow-up email. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.